The call came in at 2:17 a.m., the kind that cuts through sleep like broken glass. A man had been found wandering along the interstate, barefoot, bleeding, and disoriented 30 miles from the nearest town, and nearly 100 from anywhere he could reasonably have come from on foot. When state troopers approached him, he didn't ask for help. He didn't ask where he was. He only repeated the same sentence over and over again, his voice hoarse and terrified. They said I'd never leave. By the time Detective Mara Klein arrived at the roadside, the man was wrapped in a thermal blanket, shaking violently despite the summer heat. His eyes darted at every passing headlight, as if expecting something to follow him out of the darkness. "What's your name?" Mara asked gently, kneeling in front of him. The man hesitated. His lips moved, but nothing came out. Then, finally, he whispered, "I don't think I'm allowed to say it." That was the first time Mara heard about the place Freedom. Never knew, though no one called it that officially. There was no sign on any map, no public records that used the name. But among law enforcement veterans, defense attorneys, and inmates who survived the system long enough to speak, the legend existed. A facility so restrictive, it didn't just imprison the body, it erased the idea of choice. The man's fingerprints didn't match any database. No missing persons reports, no parole records, no prison intake logs. It was as if he'd materialized out of nowhere, except for the scars. Not violent marks, not the kind that came from fights or weapons. These were something else: thin, repeated abrasions around his wrists and ankles, faded numbers tattooed faintly on his forearm, almost deliberately obscured. Institutional, systematic. Mara had seen prisons before. This wasn't that. As dawn broke, the man finally slept. And when he woke, the fear came. That afternoon, a call came in from Internal Review. They wanted the man transferred immediately to a federal medical facility. No paperwork, no case number, just an order. Mara pushed back. "We don't even know who he is." There was a pause on the line. Then the voice said, "That's the point, Detective." She refused. By evening, the hospital lost power for exactly 90 seconds. When the lights came back on, the man's room was empty. No signs of struggle, no alarms triggered. His bed neatly made. Gone. Security footage from the hallway showed only static during the blackout. Every camera, every angle dead. Mara stood in the darkened room, heart pounding. Someone had taken him back. Or worse. That night, she received an envelope at her apartment door. No return address. Inside was a single photocopied document. An intake ledger page from decades earlier. Names were blacked out, but one line remained untouched. Facility designation, PFNK. Below it, in faded ink, a phrase scribbled into the margin. Entry concludes all outside obligations. Crossing the line into the place Freedom never knew wasn't marked by gates or walls you could see from the road. It happened on paper, with a signature, with a judge's nod, with a clerk stamping a file and sliding it into a drawer that would never be opened again. Once inside, life narrowed. Inmates followed routines so strict they didn't need orders anymore. Wake, stand, wait, work, sit, sleep, repeat. No clocks, no calendars, no mirrors. Identity reduced to compliance. Mara tracked down a former corrections administrator who had resigned abruptly years earlier. He met her in a parking lot outside a grocery store, refusing to be seen entering a building with her. "They told us it was humane," he said, eyes fixed on the horizon. "No violence, no chaos, just structure." "What went wrong?" Mara asked. He laughed bitterly. "Jitsu. Nothing. That was the problem. It worked." He described men who stopped speaking entirely. Men who forgot how to make decisions. Men who panicked when given simple choices because choice itself had become unfamiliar. "When you remove freedom long enough," he said, "people stop missing it. That's when it's gone for good." Mara asked him why anyone would ever leave. His face went pale. No one leaves. If someone did, it means the system failed. That night, Mara returned to her office and re-examined the photocopy. Under ultraviolet light, another line appeared beneath the designation code. Capacity exceeded. Review pending. Capacity exceeded meant something had changed. At 3:04 a.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. You shouldn't be looking for places that don't exist, a calm voice said. Mara stood, heart racing. Who is this? The place doesn't need to hide, the voice replied. People do that for it. The call ended. Minutes later, an alert flashed on her computer, an internal access log she hadn't opened. A facility directory, previously empty, now populated with a single location marker. No name, just coordinates. They led to a stretch of land deep in the desert, government-owned, restricted airspace overhead. No roads leading in or out. Mara stared at the screen, realizing what it meant. The place wasn't a legend. It was still operating, and someone had just made a mistake by letting one man walk out. Because if the place Freedom never knew was real, and it was then whatever happened inside those walls wasn't finished. And in the morning, Mara was going to cross the line herself. But she had no idea that once she did, freedom would stop being a guarantee and start becoming a memory. Mara didn't tell anyone she was going. Not Captain Rourke. Not internal review. Not even Nina, the analyst who'd been quietly pulling archived court entries for her all week. The moment those coordinates appeared on her screen, Mara understood the rule of cases like this. The first person you can't trust is the system that claims to protect you. She printed the map anyway, old habit, old instinct. Then she burned the page in her sink, watched the paper curl into black flakes, and memorized the route like a prayer. At 5:12 a.m., she drove out of the city with a single duffel bag in the trunk, and a half-empty tank she refilled at the last gas station before the highway gave way to nothing. The sky was steel blue, the desert still cool, and the horizon looked too clean, like someone had erased details that didn't belong. For the first 2 hours, she had cell service. Then the bars dropped to 1. Then none. The closer she got, the less the world looked like it remembered being lived in. A fence line appeared, miles long, set back from the road like it didn't want to be noticed. No signs, no warnings, just a rhythm of metal posts and razor wire that caught the morning light and turned it into something sharp. Mara pulled off onto hard-packed dirt and killed the engine. The silence was immediate, complete. No birds, no wind, no distant traffic. She stepped out and felt it. That pressure you get near secure facilities. The subtle knowledge that you're being watched even when you can't see the watcher. She lifted binoculars. Far ahead, almost hidden by heat shimmer, sat a cluster of low buildings, flat roofs, no windows facing the road. Around them, towers, cameras, floodlights even in daylight. The architecture wasn't aggressive. It was indifferent, as if the place had been built by people who didn't want to spend emotion on what happened here. Mara drove another Miaiti, Lee, and found a maintenance gate set into the fence, painted the color of dust. A keypad, a camera dome, no guard booth. She didn't have a code, but she did have the one thing the place relied on more than locks. Procedure. She parked at an angle that made her car look official, clipped her badge to her belt, and approached the camera with the posture of someone who belonged. Her heart hammered, but her face didn't move. A speaker crackled. State your purpose. Mara kept her voice calm. Detective Mara Klein. Major crimes. I'm here on a missing persons investigation tied to an unauthorized extraction from this facility. Silence. Then. There is no facility at these coordinates. Mara stared into the camera dome. Then you won't mind if I confirm that. A pause long enough to feel deliberate. Then the gate clicked. Not swung wide, just enough to invite her in like a test. Mara drove through, and the gate closed behind her with a sound that felt final. The road beyond was smooth, too maintained for a place that didn't exist. It led through open desert toward the buildings. The closer she got, the more details sharpened. Security barriers disguised as landscaping, motion sensors embedded in the ground, a second fence line, inner and higher, designed for keeping people in, even if they never stepped outside. At the main entrance, a man waited alone. Gray suit, no insignia, no visible weapon. Clean haircut, neutral expression, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting it by design. "Detective Klein," he said, as if he'd been expecting her specifically. Mara didn't like that. "Who are you?" "Mr. Halden," he replied. "Compliance liaison." "That's not a job title," she said. "It is here." He gestured toward a side door. No front desk, no lobby. Just controlled entry, like airports use when they don't want you to see who's boarding. Mara hopped inside. Cold air hit her skin. The hallway was bright, white, and unnervingly quiet. The lighting didn't flicker. The floors didn't squeak. Even her footsteps seemed to vanish. "Where is the man who was taken from the hospital?" she asked. Mr. Halden walked at a measured pace. "You're referring to an unidentified subject who trespassed into a restricted roadway and was recovered for his own safety." "That's a nice way to describe kidnapping," Mara said. Mr. Halden's mouth almost smiled. Almost. "Words are flexible, detective. Outcomes are not." They passed a security window. Through it, Mara saw a room where men in identical uniforms sat at metal desks, hands flat on the surface, eyes forward. Not restrained, not struggling, just waiting. A digital clock on the wall displayed time, but only in minutes. No date, no day. Mara slowed. "How long have they been sitting there?" "As long as required," Halden said. "Required by who?" Halden stopped at a heavy door with no label. A camera stared down from above it. "This place exists because the outside world demanded certainty," he said, voice smooth. "No riots, no escapes, no recidivism, no headlines. The public wanted dangerous problems removed from view." Mara's stomach tightened. "So you remove people?" "We contain them," Halden corrected. "Containment is not cruelty. It is efficiency." He pressed his palm to a scanner. The door unlocked with a soft hiss. Inside was a small conference room with a single table and 2 chairs. No windows. On the far wall, a framed document with a seal and a list of statutes in tiny print. The kind of legal foundation designed to make moral questions sound administrative. Halden sat. Mara stayed standing. "You came here to find a man," Halden said. "But your real question is bigger." Mara's eyes narrowed. "Say it." "You want to know why someone left," Halden said. "Because leaving is not a feature. It is a fault." Mara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "He said the lights never turned off." Halden nodded once, like he'd received a complaint about a hotel room. When you remove natural markers of time, you remove expectation. When you remove expectation, you remove resistance. "That's psychological torture," Mara snapped. Halden's gaze stayed calm. "It's behavioral stabilization." Mara leaned forward, voice low. "Where is he?" Halden looked at her for a moment, as if evaluating whether she was capable of understanding what she asked for. Then he slid a folder across the table. Inside, a photo. The man from the highway, seated in a plain room, eyes unfocused, a number displayed on a placard beside him. His wrists were bare, but the marks remained. Under the photo, a line of text. Subject, 1182 reintegration attempt. Failed. Mara's mouth went dry. Reintegration attempt? Halden folded his hands. "We test systems. We test compliance. We test whether an individual can re-enter the world without contaminating it. Contaminating, Mara repeated, disgusted. Halden didn't flinch. The outside world is fragile. It runs on faith. Faith that institutions are clean, that justice is fair, that punishment has limits. Certain truths destabilize that faith. Mara's pulse surged. So you tried to release him? Halden's eyes didn't leave hers. Yes. Briefly. We needed to know if conditioning held beyond these walls. And when it didn't, Mara began. Halden finished the sentence gently. We reclaimed the asset. Asset, not person. Mara stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. This is illegal. Halden tilted his head. Illegal under which jurisdiction? You are standing in a place that exists by exception, by secrecy. By signed agreements you will never be allowed to read. Mara's hand drifted toward her weapon, not as a threat, more like a reflex against helplessness. Halden noticed. If you draw that firearm, detective, the building locks down. If you attempt to leave, you will be detained for your safety. If you speak about this place, your credibility will be dismantled before your first interview ends. Mara's throat tightened. She thought of the evidence logs, the hospital blackout, the static footage, the way the system moved like one organism. This is why it exists, she said, more to herself than him. Not to hold criminals, to hold stories. Halden's expression softened by a fraction. We don't remove freedom, he said. We remove the illusion that freedom applies equally. That's the final lesson. Mara realized then that the room wasn't just a conversation. It was a decision point. Halden slid a second document toward her. A non-disclosure agreement. A transfer order. A polite-looking paper weapon. Sign, he said. Return to your life. Let the legend stay a legend. Mara stared at the pen. Her mind flashed to the man's voice. They said I'd never leave. She didn't sign. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over the record button. Halden's eyes narrowed. That won't work. Mara hit record anyway. My name is Detective Mara Klein, she said, voice steady. I am inside a restricted facility operating outside public oversight. I have been shown proof. The lights dimmed instantly. A low tone sounded through the building. Not loud, but present, like the whole place had inhaled. Halden stood. The calm was gone now, replaced by something clinical. Detain, he said into the air. The door behind Mara unlocked not with a click, but with a controlled release. Two men entered. Not guards, not police. Plain clothes, blank faces, moving with the certainty of people who never consider failure. Mara backed toward the table, adrenaline flooding her limbs. She didn't raise her weapon. She didn't have time. She did the only thing she could. She flung her phone across the room toward the vent near the ceiling, where it clattered into the metal grate and disappeared behind it. One of the men grabbed her arm. Firm, not violent, efficient. Halden watched with a quiet disappointment, like she'd misunderstood a simple instruction. You wanted the truth, he said. Now you'll learn the cost of holding it. They escorted her out into the hallway. As she passed the glass-walled rooms, she saw the inmates again still, silent, eyes forward. And in that moment, she understood broken time. Not hours, not days. A life measured in repeated motions until the part of you that remembers choice dissolves. The men led her to a door at the end of the corridor. Above it, in small letters she hadn't noticed before, was a code. PFNK. The place freedom never knew. The door opened. Inside was a room with bright lights and a single chair bolted to the floor. No windows. No shadows to hide in. A speaker on the wall crackled to life. A calm voice spoke, not Halden's. Subject intake begins now. Mara's breath caught. Then, from somewhere beyond the wall, faint but unmistakable, she heard a familiar hoarse whisper, like a man trying to remember how to be human. They said I'd never leave. The door closed, soft as a sigh. And far away, in the outside world, Mara Klein's case file updated automatically, quietly, without drama. Status: transferred. No location listed. No further action required. Weeks later, Nina Havel sat alone at her desk, staring at Mara's last known access logs. There was one anomaly, one outbound data ping at 3:19 a.m., routed through a maintenance network the IT department swore didn't exist. Attached, a short audio file. Nina clicked play. Mara's voice filled the room, shaky but clear. My name is Detective Mara Klein. If you're hearing this, the place freedom never knew is real. It's not built to correct. It's built to contain people, evidence, and the idea that freedom has limits. The file ended with a sound like a door closing. Nina's hands trembled as she looked at the fluorescent lights above her desk. For the first time, she noticed how bright they were, how constant, and how suddenly the office felt just a little too quiet. If you want more real crime stories buried in silence and shadows, subscribe to the channel because some places don't just lock people away. They erase the world's ability to prove they were ever there.